Well, the story continues with the moment where the president of the academy looks out the window and addresses Hae-ming Oceanus. She still couldn't figure out how he got her pendant, so she pressed it to her again and asked if it was really him. She remembered a situation where a guy was reaching out to her, clinging to a tree and yelling for her to hold on to him, saving her life. At that moment, a girl came into their office who wanted to talk about an upcoming competition that was planned and postponed at the academy. She understood and said she would attend to it immediately. Meanwhile, some strange things were happening near the largest building at the academy, as it looked like someone was using magic to make the trees wrap around the entire building. Hae-ming stepped closer and looked at the steps he had to climb, adding that this must be what that idiom means. He got a little upset and pulled his hand to his head, frustrated that there is no such thing as a free lunch. He remembered the words of the girl who informed him that the library is in need of more manpower, but the students have been a bit self-absorbed lately. So if he really wants it, she has no problem helping him apply for partial authorization of the archives. While he was still standing there, some guy also ran up to him and started yelling in his direction and drawing attention to himself, which really didn't please the guy because he didn't have time for this idle talk yet. It was the same watchman who had been on the same shift when the guy found the seal in the library and made a lot of noise. He was a little flustered and asked if the guy was really the student Miss Worcester had recommended. He confirmed that this was correct, after which the guard asked the boy to follow him. They were standing in the center of the room, and the guard decided to give him a tour, pointing out that the teacher responsible for organizing the library books still hasn't come back, so they need the help of a couple of students. He decided to light the candles and continued his story, adding that the books that need to be organized are on that table, and that he would take care of the rest, because he had to leave immediately. Hae-ming thanked him and sat down to review and analyze the books with a deep sigh, for he had absolutely never liked reading. Really, why would he do that if he was the strongest Lord of Sea in the world? It sounds even strange, but still he took the first book in his hands, because he knew himself that it would definitely not be so easy. His assistant also watched him and said that she thinks Miss President is just trying to mess with him. He didn't like that, so he hit her with the book, asking if she really had nothing better to do. After all, instead of making fun of him, why doesn't she just start helping him too? But she was very surprised and tense by the question, because doesn't he remember what her duties are? Ever since she became a spirit, she can't touch anything except for him. Checking another book, he just agreed with her and asked her to just stay there and try not to cause trouble for him. But the girl didn't like the fact that he thought she was lying to him, so she put her hand between the books to prove it, and also began to fly toward him, after which they both heard some very strange sound of falling, and saw the glasses that flew to the ground along with the books. It turns out that it was some blue-haired girl who also seemed to be on her way to the library, and accidentally slipped and fell to the ground. It was really unpleasant, because all her notes and books fell and scattered on the ground. She couldn't see anything, so she tried to fumble for her glasses amidst all the clutter. Suddenly, the guy came up to her and picked them up, handing them to the girl, saying that it seemed to be exactly what she was looking for, which really surprised her a lot. When she put them on, she said that they were the ones and added that there is already a bit of mist on them. After that, she was very happy and thanked the guy for his help and work. But he was a little shocked, because it seemed to him that the girl was really very scared and confused. So he decided to ask if she was okay, and she is not hurt anywhere. After wiping her eyepieces, the girl looked at the guy and was very much surprised and began to glow with joy, because she saw a really very handsome guy who began to communicate with her and also helped her. This immediately made her blush and embarrass herself, after which she began to react in a very strange way, because the first thing she did was to lean in front of him and tell him that she was fine and start thanking him, which he obviously could not have expected. The guy also didn't know how to respond properly, So he offered to help her collect all those books on the floor, which the girl refused and said there was no need. Just let this teacher do it herself. Then she used her powers and waved her magic wand, which lifted absolutely all the books and notes into the air. And a second later, all the books were sorted and stacked in the right order. She continued to be embarrassed and even lifted her leg up to get the guy's attention, and added that she'd just go back to whatever you were doing, and no need to worry about this teacher. He and his girlfriend were shocked by this event, and just stood still for a while, trying to get away from what a strange teacher this was. Suddenly they saw a rock on the floor, which they immediately began to examine together, trying to guess why it was here. When they took it in their hands, they saw the inscription, Quimper Megamot, which surprised them very much. Hai Ming looked in her direction and asked, "Did that teacher drop it just now?" Then he continued to look at it, which aroused the girl's interest, for wouldn't he try to bring it back? He replied, "That teacher went up to the second floor. There's a magic circle protecting that area. If you don't have permission, you wouldn't be able to go in." So he lifted the stone up again and began to examine it more closely, emphasizing the need to return it to her when she comes back down instead. But it was not an easy rock, because the inscriptions on it had already begun to glow, which surprised the guy very much. He began to feel that there was something off with this rock. It was already quite dark outside, so the guy began to stretch and was very glad that he had finally completed all his tasks. But the thought never left him that that inconsiderate teacher never came back. The assistant was also very tired and told him so, asking why didn't he just bring it back another day? After all, it is just a rock after all. He looked at her and agreed, for she may have gone out the other exit a long time ago. So they began to walk out, agreeing that they would just return it tomorrow. Meanwhile, someone started watching them and listening to what they were talking about. It was one of the mages who played chess and was on top of the building, if you can call it that, because it was more like just concrete slabs. But nevertheless, he watched them and laughed, as suddenly someone began to move in the bushes, which also made him very wary. So he instantly disappeared so as not to give himself away. The boys went on to discuss the situation that had happened to them, where the girl asked, "Now that I think about it, didn't that teacher call you by name, even though it was your first time meeting her?" "I think so. Maybe she knew it because the president told her." Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by two other Academy members, who were definitely not in a very friendly mood. So they started discussing them. "Isn't this the student our president has been paying special attention to?" What a coincidence. It was Leo Frayne and Siege Slyke, whom Cindy had previously asked to call for help. But Hai Ming was very surprised by them, so he decided to ask who they were and what they were doing here. But they didn't want to talk to him normally, so they started answering them aggressively. "Siege, don't it you think that tonight's scenery is perfect for the occasion?" "It is, young master." The guy kept standing there bewildered and shocked as they kept talking to him. "Are you stupid or something? Why are you suddenly narrating yourselves? Wait, I feel like I have seen this happen somewhere before." Everything around became red, and then the girl started screaming, adding that for nights where the moon is dark and the winds howl loudly. Then the whole place looked like hell and began to burn, and the guy straightened his arms and began to shout, saying that it is a perfect day to wreak havoc. And his eyes also began to glow with a red light that filled with terror. Immediately after that, Hai Ming began to run a little slip on the water. There was a really big rock in front of him that should have stopped him, but he jumped straight to the top of that mountain without much trouble, after which he jumped off and flew swiftly down, because he did not like this attitude to himself. But it is really necessary to save himself. He thought about that eye-like object he saw just now. Immediately, a red glow, very much like a bonfire, appeared not far from him, and whistled and caught his attention. And then, a second later, there was a huge explosion right in front of him that blew away absolutely everything in its path. It was a blow from the sky, very similar in trajectory to the meteorite that flew into the forest and also hit our Lord of Sea Girl. He began to analyze the situation and said, if I saw correctly, that was a relic of flame spirit. A flame spirit of very high rank. But that is weird. How did he become a human's contracted spirit? Isn't it always serving at the side of the black flame dragon? At this point, 2 of the academy ran up to the guy and found him complimenting him on how he was moving really fast, which surprised him a lot. Siege became very angry. What? Not running away? Immediately afterwards, he started shouting, not like you could anyway, and activated a flame of fire, which flew toward the boy and the girl, and began to envelop everything in its path, destroying the ground. Haiming was shocked, and a little scared, not even as much for himself as for his friend. He couldn't understand. Had the fire disappeared? Suddenly, a red stain formed in the ground near his feet, and it began to smell up. The girl immediately ordered him to step back, after which a second later, a huge ball of fire started shooting out of her, which was similar in power to a volcanic eruption. The guy smiled, realizing that it is an attack from underground, and he got lucky there. Siege was clearly not happy that he missed, so he asked his partner if he realized what had just happened. It was some scary spirit who looked like a very old grandmother and a man at the same time, and could not hide his aggressive emotions. He couldn't understand why the guy couldn't learn to control his earth-splitting fire properly. Do you think you're being funny, doing some stupid surprise attack? The guy's girlfriend was already very aggressive and asked his permission to teach that red-haired idiot a lesson. He was a little surprised by this offer, but still asked her to go and hide in a safe place, as it would be quite difficult to deal with him. He thought about the fact that he was originally planning to avoid trouble, so he ran away, but it seems that no matter what, he is forced into battle. But the girl started to stop him and talk him out of it, so she quickly ran up to him and started hugging him very tightly, and also tried to kiss him, which he obviously did not expect and did not want at that moment. So he started pushing her away from him, ordering her to stop making a fuss and go already, which she clearly did not agree with. But the guy needed her to leave because this place is too dangerous. She tried to explain to him that she didn't want to leave and let the guy get hurt again like the last time, so she would stay here to help him as well. These words surprised him very much, and he found it a little hard to believe, so he turned to her. And with a calm face, he asked, "When have you ever been useful?" She continued to hold on to him and clarified what he was allowing himself right now. People watched him in bewilderment and didn't understand why, right now, he was talking to the air. From the outside, it looked really funny and amusing. Master decided to act and said that this is too good. Keep yourself at a distance, to which his partner agreed. Immediately after that, things got really scary again. The magician started calling on the spirit of fire again, addressing him and shouting, "If you want to blame someone for your current predicament, blame yourself for offending someone who should never be offended." Suddenly, there was a little buzz and everything turned blue, after which the curse of flame charged and flew towards Haiming, which really scared him, because he did not want to fight now. He also realized that right now he doesn't want to hurt a relic spirit at this point, so he started creating water around himself and made a protective field for himself against fire, adding that now he can only fight his way out. His water power began to resist the fire and protect him from damage, but he couldn't understand what was happening right now, so he was shocked. Was it really an explosion? The blast wave was very strong indeed, and it looked like Haiming was not prepared for it at all. There were 2 guys standing in the trees, Cindy and Victor, watching the situation and the explosions in the woods. "Miss, it seems that it has started. But do we really have to do this? Now that I think about it, it could be that he only had the imprint of scent. It wouldn't be the first time the seal tried this trick on us." But the girl was absolutely sure what she felt from him was the seal and not just another imprint that she could guarantee. Or at least, it is a scent that is much stronger than the one she has felt from the seal itself. She looked deep into the woods and added that since you aren't willing to help me in the academy, now that we are outside. Hi, Ming Oceanus. I hope you won't disappoint me. At this point, he coughed and tried to move away from what had just happened, but he had no way of knowing what was that explosion just now. After that, he got very tense and scared, because he remembered his friend Exie Air and asked if she was okay. She was just sitting on the ground with her knees bent and pointing her finger up, saying that everything was fine. This made him happy, and as long as she is okay, you can keep fighting. At that moment, the guy with the red hair came closer to him and started laughing and asking, "Did you go crazy from that hit? You are talking to the air again." He could barely contain his laughter, but he said it was just fine for him, since sending a crazy person to hell wouldn't burden his mind at all. So he stood up, spread his arms, and began to summon the spirit of fire again. Suddenly, blue flames appeared again, and a second later, a huge block of stone flew in, which began to interfere with the fire and engaged in a fight with it. It blocked the attack on Haiming and allowed him to remain unharmed. He closed his eyes from such a bright flash and couldn't believe it either. Was there really something blocking it? Neither could his opponent understand what was going on. And then, the stone block became several times larger and began to approach the ground, and then it broke and fell with all its force. At the top of the rock, feet appeared and began to slowly descend downward. Haiming began to get nervous and didn't understand who it was in front of him. It seemed to be the same mage who was playing a chess game. Is this the seal? Meanwhile, at Asker's mini-theater, a guy was standing with a girl, and she started asking him about that flame spirit thingy. What is it? She has never seen it before. Kurkala? My knowledge is limited to the records written about them in Grandfather Hay's books. Kurkala is a flame spirit of very high rank. Born in the volcanic crater near the Relic of Flame, magma is its main source of food. Its personality is naturally warlike, by gathering and condensing the fire element through the vertical pupil at its middle. It attacks by shooting flaming beams of light. Once, as punishment for suffering defeat in a territorial battle against the Black Flame Dragon, their race was forced to serve the Black Flame Dragon. The 3 magic circles on its body are proof of its slave status. Then, where is the Relic of Flame located? What is the difference between their relic and our Relic of Sea? I think it is towards the southeast of the mainland. About the difference between our 2 relics. What type of spirit is the Black Flame Dragon? This. Who is more powerful? Our family's Leviathan or them? This question was not answered, after which the girl asked, "Also, why are you constantly chased down even though you are the Lord of the Sea? It feels like you have gotten weaker. Is it because you are a human?" Just reject you humanity, Haiming. But it made him angry, and he asked the girl to stop asking him questions. He would rather be dead than answer them, after which the snake bit his head again. Meanwhile, purple explosions began to form on the battlefield. Black magic became active, and the very chains that someone seemed to want to grab onto appeared again. Well, sitting at the table were the very principals of the academy, who still continued to play chess and discuss the situation. One of them added that Cindy Sandal's people are now in opposition to Haiming Oceanus. By killing Sandal's people and putting the blame on that lad, we should be able to divert her attention somewhat. But the second masked monster didn't seem to agree, because by muddying the waters, it will be easier for them to snatch the object. They are closer to the goal of releasing the seal on Master. But suddenly the clown interrupted him and turned to the most important of them, asking if he was really sure that no issues would arise this time. He simply stroked his snake that had been watching everyone in the library earlier and asked everyone to relax. This time they will be sending out one of the 7 people of the beginning, the puppeteer who toys with the world itself, the 6th puppet. At this moment, Ming was as serious as possible, because in front of him stood the same mage who saved him from the spirit of fire and appeared completely unexpectedly. He did not know what would happen next and how to act. He turned and looked in his direction, which really surprised and scared the guy. He realized it was the scent of black magic. The master started shouting in his direction, asking where he had come from, and if he had come here to save that boy. But the mysterious magician just looked in the guy's direction once more, which made him very wary and frightened. The master was also surprised and angry. Wait, isn't that black hooded figure an accomplice from the weird group Miss Cindy said the newcomer is in? At this point in time, according to the plan, he is supposed to retreat and wait for Miss Cindy to arrive. But he got very angry and realized that just me is enough. Then he immediately started waving his arms and summoning Kirkala, whom he directed toward the mage who had appeared. But he didn't care at all. He was as calm as possible and simply waved his hand, activating his water power without even looking in his direction. And immediately thereafter, a confrontation between the power of water and fire began, accompanied by very strong explosions. Suddenly, a few seconds later, there was a really strong explosion that made the mage laugh, and the guy feel very uncomfortable, because his Kirkala was very easily destroyed. The boy watched and did not understand what it was, as it happened again. The fire exploded as soon as it touched the water, but the mysterious magician kept looking at him and decided to explain him a little, adding that water created through means of magic one did evaporate, even when faced with high heat, but if the flame that comes near is mixed with specks of dust, it will cause the water to evaporate in an instant, which will cause a series of explosions. So it is a type of compound magic which combines both the Department of Flame and the Department of Earth. But the guy was very surprised and scared because of what he actually saw through his magic, and he has to say that was quite clever. Ming, observing the situation, was also shocked. He had no other thoughts but his own magic. He really wanted to figure out what it was, even though he was a person who always slept in class, but it is a pity. In the meantime, the conflict only continued to escalate, and already the mage took out his purple scythe, which he wanted to destroy the guy for excessive insolence, and swung it with all his might. A second later, the guy was already very shocked and frightened, so he tried to restrain her and stop the attack, but it was too late. The weapon hit him directly and hurt him very badly, all because he is not cautious enough. The guy with the red hair was shocked and visibly pale. His wounds just kept getting bigger, and his pupils got smaller and smaller. He didn't understand what had just happened. How did they appear in front of him so suddenly? And why didn't Kirkala stop them? But the magician at this point continued to laugh and watch the situation unfold, while the guy was still in shock and fairly calm. After he realized what had just happened to him, he began screaming sharply in agony and screaming for help. Meanwhile, his assistant watched the situation unfold and watched as the unknown man in the black cloak continued to still stand on the rocks and do these things to his partner. It seems that young master's movements suddenly stopped. He was upset and scared because there is some black mist in the way, so he can see clearly. A huge red snake also appeared, which really looked as creepy as possible and inspired fear. Was it really Uncle Dragon and all that he said true? At this point, his assistant could no longer simply observe the situation, so he quickly ran to his partner, which surprised the wizard. But he didn't care at all. He wanted to know if he was all right. He picked him up in his arms and started yelling, asking if he was okay. But he showed absolutely no emotion, though his eyes were not closed, no matter how hard he tried. The magician explained to him that it is no use. He won't wake up no matter how much you tell at him. He smiled again and said that only I can wake up someone who is entranced by the black mist illusion magic. Sieg looked at his assistant and was very frightened. But the magician meanwhile continued, "You, on the other hand, have retained your consciousness ever since I started releasing the black mist. How odd." Sieg started yelling at him, even though he was frightened, ordering him to give the young master go or else. Doesn't blame him for being rude. But he didn't care at all, and it made him even angrier. So he ordered the guy to be quiet and directed another charge of black magic at him as well, which flew out and grabbed him by the throat. After that, he lifted him up several meters, and even though the guy screamed and tried to get out, the magician simply continued the dialogue with him. "I must thank you. If it weren't for you bringing yourself to death's door, there would have been a witness to my plan." The boy tried to get out as he was very uncomfortable with the realization, even though he was firmly trapped. He still pulled himself together and ordered the mage to let the young master go. He was very surprised by this, as he refused to listen to the guy completely, so he decided to clarify whether these would really be his last words. After that, everything around began to turn white. Well then, farewell. The mage also began to turn white, which was not the case with his magic. It looked like he already wanted to finish what he started and destroy the guy. But at that moment, a really very unusual situation happened, in which Hai Ming decided not to stay away, despite the fact that the unknown magician saved his life from two malevolent enemies who were trying to destroy the guy. So he immediately picked up his sword and threw himself into battle, ordering the black mage to let the guy go immediately.